All right, welcome back, my friends. Brian here with VetteSource, where we are currently sequestered in the garage today because we are getting an odd occurrence in Texas here. We're getting some weather that we don't normally get. So, of course, here in Texas, if you live below the snow line, nobody here usually knows how to drive in the rain or the snow, the rain, much less the snow or frozen ice. So, of course, everybody's kind of running around in Chicken Little mode. But so today it's wet and 37 degrees right now. So, frankly, it's just nasty. With all this humidity here, I envy you guys that get to go through the cold with a little bit less humidity, simply because sometimes it doesn't feel quite so miserable, even though it still is. But anyway, I figured what I'd do today is let's go ahead and we'll do a little story time today, show and tell, if you will. If you're new to me, you've never seen my shenanigans before, I am Brian with VetteSource. I am my main business, obviously, is I'm in the Corvette salvage side of the business. I deal in the parts mainly for Corvettes, but along the way that I've been doing this over 20 plus years, I've acquired pieces of inventory that just are not going to get torn down or dismantled. And of course, our 67 here, if you looked at my channel and saw it or got the recommendation, you may have noticed this is our channel avatar car. This is what I use for the channel. And what I figured I'd do is tell you a little bit of the story, or the actual story of this car and how I came across it. So I'm fortunate with this car. This is a 67 Corvette. For those of you that have not seen me before, this is a 427 435 horse tri-power car that is original, has not been restored, managed to avoid the cruel fate of some really, and again, I only say this because I've been in the business for so long and I've restored a lot of cars. It avoided the cruel fate of getting torn down just simply to make it look brand new again. I appreciate restored cars. I don't want to knock anybody that has restored cars because I really enjoy them, but they fit in a different profile, even as far as enthusiasts go, because with a restored car, you're now worried about deterioration of the restored car. The value is in the restoration, right? The value is in the fact it looks new. The value is in that you can take it and people ooh and all over it, rightly so, because it looks like a car just rolled off the assembly line. So that honestly is probably the more popular route to go with a lot of these cars. This car managed to fall through the cracks all the time between the various owners that it had, and managed to avoid being torn down for restoration. It was used lovingly as a special car because even when these were new, these 435 horse Corvettes were quite new. In fact, you can see the last time this car was actually on the road was in 1990, and actually registered. So, for right now, I've discussed it with a couple times in my videos. This car has been more of a static display while I raised my kids. When I acquired it, which I'll tell you about in a minute, it was one of those things where it was like a placeholder for me. And if you've been in business for yourself, you understand the process of placeholders, right? You have to park money in certain places so that you can make sure you're going to have money if you don't have sales going on. So anyway, I'll get away from that. So here's where we're at with this car. So this car was purchased brand new by a young man that had just graduated from A&M in College Station here in Texas. And he was an engineering student. He was a mechanical engineering kid. And he had always wanted a Corvette. So what he did was he saved up for his Corvette over the course of his college career. I think he got a little bit of money from his parents. So when he graduated from school, the first thing he did was he walked down, or drove, I should say, to a very small farming community in Texas that he grew up in, that even today has about 400 people that live there. It's extremely small. And he walked into the dealership, and this is from his own mouth because he's still alive. I talk to him every once in a while about the car, and he said that when he first went into the dealership to buy it, they actually refused him at first because, now, if you're not from the 60s area, you won't know that a lot of dealerships, especially in rural towns, are extremely small. The people you may be dealing with are the people that were on the billboard in the front of the dealership. So he went in and talked to these two brothers that ran this dealership, in a farming community, and they flat out refused him at first and told him, no way, we're not going to order that car for you because a 435 horse 427 Corvette is going to be a warranty nightmare, and we don't want to deal with it. Because even back then, they knew what people were dealing with. So he didn't go into how he finally talked them into, oh, my temperature wires broke, into buying it. But he went ahead, he ordered it, and I want to say he placed the order in mid-February, the beginning of February. I think February 9th, because I do have his original notebook here. Regardless, he ordered this car early February. It was built, and that's funny, guys. It's almost its birthday. So the car was built on February 27th. And it's funny, this car shares the same birthday with the 69 Daytona Yellow 427 that you've seen me work on in another video. I've got a link up there at the top if you've never seen that. So this car was built on February 27th, and by March 9th, this car was delivered to the dealership. He actually took possession of this car on March 9th. So he took possession of this car, and then he proceeded to drive it every day back and forth to work. I think he told me around 75 miles round trip. He drove it like a regular car. And he did this for 7 years. I don't remember if 75 miles a day was the exact mileage, but it was enough to where in the first 7 years it racked up the majority of the miles that are on it. Right now it's sitting at 73,900. No, I'm sorry, 73,400 and I think it's 440 miles that are on this car. Let me see. Again, it is, yes, 74,462 is what I have on it right now. So it's been driven about 500 miles since 1990. So anyway, he drove this for a long time, and then unfortunately he said by the mid-late 70s, when he was maintaining it, he used the term that a lot of car guys use. He said, I felt like a prisoner to the car because I was so focused on trying to maintain it. Because you got to remember, by the late 70s, these cars had already began to accelerate in value. So he made the decision to sell it. It was sold to another gentleman that lived east of San Antonio. And again, the biggest thing about this car is it's never been out of Texas ever. It's always been within a 200 square mile radius of where it was delivered from the St. Louis factory on March 9th. So the gentleman in east of San Antonio bought it, and then he was actually in the Corvette parts business like I am. And he kept it for a little while, and then he sold it to fund some expansion of his business. Just like I said, used it as an asset and for more money for the business. And then it came over here to the Houston area where I'm at. So it sat over here in another gentleman's garage for probably 6 months, then moved over to the other side of Houston for 4 years, where it sat with a collection of other cars. And that's where it was actually more started to be talked about to restore this car. There are two brothers here in Houston that restore cars. I worked for them briefly, back in the 90s, the Neighbors brothers. You guys may know them. They knew about this car. They were aware of this car. But for whatever reason, the owner elected he was not going to have it restored. So, and this was a few years earlier than I had worked for Ken and Gary. But anyway, so it moved on from that owner in 1990 to another, that would have been the fourth owner. And he bought it and began to refresh it again, because even by then, it had the carbs rebuild and other things like that. So he wanted to refresh it, get it back on the road. He kept it for about 2.5 years, and then it sold in 1993 to the pair of gentlemen that I bought it from. Now, the gentleman that I acquired this car from bought this car simply for speculation. Okay, so the late 80s was a run-up in value on these cars, and everybody was jumping into the Corvette business, rightly so. I understand why they did it. So they acquired this car in 93. This was one of, I think, 10 cars they bought. And it was the only big block Corvette they could find mid-year wise, and it was the only one that they never got to because they were going to restore it. And again, it fell between the cracks, and they never got to it. So it sat for 10 more years until 2003. So I happened to be, and it's just a conveyance of coincidences, I happened to be in the area one day, and I was tasked. I had to go pick up a parts car that I'd acquired, an 84, a white 84. I remember that car specifically, from a gentleman that was storing it at this mechanic shop where this car was at. So I can remember pulling into the mechanic shop and seeing the car sitting there, and my brother was with me, and he said, "Look, there's an old Corvette," because he didn't know Corvettes as well as I did. And I said, "Well, nobody leaves a 427 Corvette sitting outside like this." And sure enough, when I walked over to it, there it was. This is exactly what it looked like when I found it. It actually had a faded for sale sign still in the window. But I think I removed it because this is right when I first started talking to them about buying it. So it was just sitting in the portico. There's actually a open area, like garage, behind the shop. This is the area back there where the parts cars, and of course the mechanic shop, if you've been around mechanic shops, you know broken cars are always in the back. So it was back here, and walked over. I opened the door of this car and was totally fell on my face, because not only was the clock still ticking, the interior lights came on, everything was still working, and then I opened the hood, and of course you see what's under the hood. So after conversations with these gentlemen and things like that, I decided to go ahead, make the investment in it. The exciting thing for me was, now if you've been in the Corvette world and older Corvettes, you know that the documentation is everything, because if it's not documented or it does not have a history back to new, it might as well just be a base car. There's no way to prove it, so you don't know who's done what over the years. This car is unique in that when I walked into that office, the gentleman had not only the original, let's see if I can pull this out. He had the original folder that the gentleman had used when he acquired the car, his binder of things that he kept. They kept everything else. So it had the window sticker, the protective plate, all the other good things that are considered like the Bible portion of things for these cars. So let me go back here. I'm going to hide a few things simply because I want to keep privacy for some of the owners, previous owners of this car. So if I skip through a few things, bear with me. So, of course, this is when I first dragged it home. There's the 69 I talked about that's still with me. And just it was in dirty shape and nothing really special, kind of dull. But, of course, there's our original owner's manual packet right there with the owner's manual still in it. Here is our AM/FM radio operating instructions. Now this is what, again, this is like the holy grail that proves what this car is. So if you come in here and you've never seen one of these, General Motors back in the day, this was how they validated warranties, okay? So when you went to pick up your car, they gave you this little booklet, and there's a funny little credit card there. Let me do this so I don't protect his privacy. So this little credit card was actually run through what looks like a credit card machine, and that was what they used to validate your warranty. So you can see the all-important figures there. If you guys see that JE on the end of that 1021, that's our I'm sorry. Yeah, our 215, I'm sorry. That's our engine assembly date with that suffix code JE shows this is a 435 horse. So what you would do with this book is every time you'd go in to validate the warranty, and they required you to do this every 6 months. It wasn't like something that you could just get away with. Sorry, I'm just trying to hide the previous owner's info here simply because it's a privacy thing, you know. So what you would do, I think I'm in the backwards, they would tell you, you need to go ahead, this is what's covered, this is what's not covered, things of that nature. And for required maintenance and maintenance schedule recommended. So they actually had things, and you'd actually have what they called owner's maintenance record back then. So, and what you do is you take this thing in to validate your warranty to show that you were getting it covered, and they would just scan your credit card up there like that, and then they would sign it off. So you can see, like I was talking about, this was delivered on March 8th of 1967 to Krieg Brothers Chevrolet here in Texas. And that dealership, unfortunately, does not exist anymore, but it's kind of a cool historical footnote. And then instead of what the filling out that document that the owner they provided, this owner actually went and wrote in a notebook everything that he did. So, 323, oil and filter, oil filter. He changed the oil. He did the oil, validated the warranty in December of 67. He kept up with it quite a bit through the years. You can see validate warranty, adjust valves. Of course, this has a solid lifter motor, so it's not like it keeps up with that. So you can see oil and filter, and as he drove it, you can actually see the miles he had put on it as he was driving it. So within 2 years, he'd put 17,500 miles on this car. So this just continued on, as he kept using it. And 1974, the car had 48,000 miles on it. To me, I like the story of old cars. This is probably one of the coolest documents I have in here because it's like a living record of what he'd done to this car. And, OEM, 6-quart oil pan, stuff like that he did. Adjust the valves, things of that nature. And by 76, the car had, actually, let's see, in December of 1976, at the end of the year, this car had 60,000 miles on it. So, like I said, he drove it. I think he finally stopped driving it, like he told me around middle of 77. So, our last entry, I think in here, yeah, so this was in 1990 when the new owner, purchased it from him. So, it's a very neat historical record for the car. You don't get that a lot when you're buying these older cars. They just don't present themselves very often. I do even have the original. Let's see if I can show this in a way without showing the owner's name. I have the original tax receipt from Bexar County. And this is probably going to blow you away more than anything else. This is May 15th. So take a guess what you think this owner paid for this car in 1967. So there's what he paid for this 435 horse 1967 Corvette, $4,216.76. And he had to pay $84.34 in sales tax, which, of course, money back then was a whole different proposition when the wages were different. So you can see there's a lot of old registrations in here, historical records, parts that have been bought for it over the years. So all in all, the caretakers have just kind of taken care of it and maintained it. And that will be the way I keep this car as long as it's in the possession of my business, because I really... I was fortunate in that I never had to sell it for money for the business. I was able to get away with that, through part sales, and I was able to keep the squirreled away because sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, and that's just the way it goes. So you can see multiple receipts for work done on the car. But, from going forward, I think what we're going to do is I've noticed quite a bit of interest in this car as I've done a few videos on it. Now, let me back up a little bit too. So when I acquired this car, again, I know it sounds sacrilegious, but in a way, even though I'm in the Corvette business, I considered this car kind of a placeholder, if you will, because it was a break glass in case of financial emergency for a business. And again, that's something, if you're self-employed, you're going to understand this. So now that 17 years, 18 years almost have progressed, and I very sparingly have used this car just to show to people in the business, or actually I show this car a lot to, not a lot, but to people who are looking for originality's sake, how things were originally installed on cars, because there are very few of these left in an unrestored condition type of state. Now this one's not probably the best condition out of all the original unrestored cars, but it's in very good condition for being unrestored. The paint obviously is showing its wear. But what's going to happen now going forward, I think, guys, is I've been thinking, kind of brainstorming how to integrate this car into the channel without just spamming you every day with the 67 Corvette. But I think what's going to happen is I'm going to take these GoPro and the fancy cameras I got, And once we pull this out of the garage and get it rejuvenated enough, we're going to go explore the back roads of Texas with this car, and I'm going to take you guys along with me with the GoPro cameras. So I think that'll be a fun way to experience this car, even if you've never been around one. Been able to hear one of these 435 horse solid lift cam 427s run and just experience what it was like to drive a car like this with literally no power brakes, right? No power steering, no air conditioning. There's nothing on this car. This car is nothing but all motor surrounded by a beautiful body style. So I'm going to go ahead and do that going forward. I'll probably bring you a video every week or two on this. I need to finish up my Formula 350. I got a lot of irons in the fire. So we're going to finish that up first before we get into this and some of the other cars. You know, we've got our 96 LT4 sitting over here, the yellow, the competition yellow. If you've never seen that car, I've got a link up there at the top for that one. And, you know, like I said, I'm a Corvette lunatic, so I have lots of inventory pieces laying around here that I like to go over and show you guys how to do things. So I've noticed I've been running my mouth for 21 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and end this for now, and let me know what you guys think. If you're interested in seeing me take this out somewhere, there's a particular road you know of that's great to go drive on, let me know where it's at, because I will put the pin on the map, and once I get my equipment in place, I will start driving this. I know it sounds sacrilegious to some people, but I swear to God, I've waited long enough while my kids have grown up to drive this car, and that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to end it for now. I'll catch up with you guys next week. If you got any questions or have any comments for me,